Mishmashing Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Today we are working on fixing mindsets a bit more. If you would like to join our lounge today, you can find it by searching 3 rounds, first to 2, with character select off. And we are joined by a Canadian Guile. Hi, Canadian Guile. I actually ended my last ranked session against Guile twice, now that I think about it. Not this Guile, though. Let's hope that they're... I know, this happened before, technically.
I suppose.
But we are around that point in our mindsets and in our play where the thing holding us back is how we approach matches. This is not going to be something simple to fix. It's not a matter of saying, oh, all I gotta do is fix this thing. But it's still kind of heavy. One thing that influences it quite a lot is when people have different ideas of what a fighting game is supposed to be like, about what is fun in it, and so on. And the issue with most modern fighting games is that they try their best to make the game accessible to everyone. They make lots of different characters that can do lots of different things. But all that generally tends to cause is a bunch of really unhappy people who don't want to play a particular form of it. In older games, this was less of a problem for a simple reason. Basically that you had enough of a top tier or enough of an ability to hard counterpick characters that you didn't have to deal with any of that. Is this laggy? Because it was 3 bars.
Extremely, it's unplayable.
I see. Unfortunate.
I can be a third of the way into a jump and teleport back to the ground being hit.
Mm-hmm. If a part of the stress and salt and those things reset to various fighting games is often that factor, the fact that you just don't like how the game or most of the characters in the game or most of the players at a particular level. There's something about the experience that might not be the entire game, but it is what you are experiencing at the moment and you don't like it. Obviously, you can just stop playing the game, and that would resolve it. Or you could limit the amount of play you have against casual or random opponents, and just shift it to, okay, well, I'm playing only in this space, I'm only willing to play against this character. Whenever I see a different character, I'll pick, at least not necessarily the counter pick, but some character that lets me do what I want to do, even if I am nowhere near great with that character. Some people can really enjoy that sort of thing, and others just tend to quit. I don't suppose the lag has cleaned up.
Nope, exactly as bad as it was.
I see.
I hope that you have a better connection. Otherwise, you will definitely have to.
They might not stay.
Yes. I wouldn't if I were them.
Well, we don't know. It might be one-sided.
Possible. We'll find out.
It's a shame because they seem to have such a good, clear idea of what they feel like doing. And really good spacing too, so you would have gotten the whole Guile experience at that. But, lag is lag.
I'm glad you can see this. I barely can. But so it is. We'll see what happens.
On this side, it wasn't that visually laggy at all, which makes me wonder exactly what was going on. But you're the closer one, so any relays might have gone to that side.
I suppose if you're watching the replay through the network, yours can be a second behind mine and get all cleaned up on the way to you. Still 3 bars to me though, so I wouldn't have expected it to be
3 bars
that
to me
bad.
as well. So I'm not expecting much either. But at least you might get to see it in the same way that I got to see yours. But I probably won't have too much to say, so we'll refocus on the side of the conversation we were probably going to discuss either way, and not so much focusing on these matches. But as for me, I'll be fighting, so I leave that to you.
Alright. Well, I can talk about my recent experiences with Sakurabot and such things. So... yes, this looks much more reasonable on my side. How's yours?
It's bad. But, to be honest, I wouldn't have adhered most of this anyway.
Alright, fair enough. So anyway, I was training on Sakurabot over the weekend somewhat, and I started out with Cammy, and I did relatively well. I had my usual, I haven't touched this bot much or in a long time problems, and ended up quickly getting over it and doing relatively well. I bumped my difficulty up a bit, but I found it interesting that I was managing to... effectively, there's a point on that bot, which is to hit Sakura with a crouching medium punch or medium kick into a combo from neutral. And the obvious and easy way to do that against that particular bot is by careful spacing and whiff punishing her. And so I found myself doing quite well at this, which is a little bit of a new experience to me, just in the sense of having the reaction speed for it. Now I know that's not necessarily as variable against a bot, but she still had things she could do to me. And in the end I did relatively well and got most of my points off of that. But when I switched from Cammy to Karine to see if I could do just as well, I had the interesting problem where I was always a few frames too slow. I learned several things in my experience, but relative to how I was doing on Cammy on Saturday, when I was working on Karine Sunday and such, I just always managed to get crush counter, counter hit, etc. because I was not making it in time. Even though we were basically in the same situation, Karine's crouch medium kick I discovered was slightly short of Cammy's, but not really enough that it would excuse the matter. And it was simply a matter of the way I was watching the match, and some of my habits on Karine being a bit different and effectively inducing another 4 or 5 frames of lag into my play. Which is, frankly, a little disconcerting. But one of those weird things that you have to get through. To add to that, I was able to manage to play Karine as if she were Cammy for about a round worth of the bot, and I went back to doing about as well. So it's definitely something about how I focus on my opponent or my match with Karine that's different than how I do it with Cammy. And so part of my hope for today, or maybe even not today, is to figure out possibly what causes that in myself and possibly how to do something about it. I already have a few theories that I can go through, but that's part of the thing. I also made a number of other interesting observations on my capabilities and habits with both characters while I was doing all of this. In any case, I don't suppose your lag has gotten any better?
No, but
Alright.
the lag is the weird kind that you get when the person's far away and there's a lot of rollback, which I know how to adapt to up to a point.
Ah.
The short version of it is to understand that your opponent's pressure strings are not reactable in that time at all. But that's the only thing you can really say you have to worry about all that hard. At least with Chun-Li, a lot of the problems that would come up with terms of spacing, for example. In other words, if I'm getting hit by jump-ins, it's because I was in the wrong place, not necessarily because the lag was stopping me from anti-airing. On Guile, that's usually the problem.
I see. I suppose that makes sense.
Now, I generally won't take advantage of lag to do that sort of thing myself. But I do have something else to work on that comes out of this. I really like playing a very specific form of Street Fighter. And people who back off a lot and wait for me to attack are not that form of Street Fighter. I always say this. So for example, this is putting me to sleep, but it's not unwinnable. It's just boring. And I understand that that's what Guile is. He is this character. So I can't really fault the player for doing what Guile does, naturally. Yeah, okay, fine. You can go. You have no meter. Can you kill me in 12 seconds? Nope.
Alright then.
Now, it's not fair to say this isn't Street Fighter. I can say it's not a form of Street Fighter I enjoy. And the lag does rob me of some of the stuff I could enjoy, such as, for example, I baited that flash kick, but couldn't punish it as a result.
Right. Some of my own fluster when facing this particular player came as a result of effectively not being able to see their movements or timings for anything, such that I don't necessarily know how to move myself. And I sort of would say that, like, I don't know how to make it about spacing, just because my reactions, for instance, are now like half screen or 3/4 screen instead of much less time than that for various things. But it seems we have some new contenders, including one that is 1 bar, so we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, on the subject of the interesting problems with currying that I had noted, I noticed that the way I watch the match, the way that I play the game, is different between Cammy and Karine. In the particular sense that on Cammy I am more observant and more reactive, and on Karine I am a little less capable of that, even if I try to specifically focus on it, depending.
This is actually one of the things that causes me problems when fighting your Karine. Because I'm not willing to do a lot of the stuff required to make this difficult for you. Because again, it's the same sort of thing. It's not really what I consider to be Street Fighter at that point.
Honestly, I can't say that I'm necessarily a fan of it myself. This realization and a bit of the understanding of it that I got kind of annoyed me, to be fair. When playing Karina, I do it in a... I should probably try and talk about it between matches instead of during, so I will do that.
But I can tell you a lot of what is going on when I'm fighting you mentally.
Sure.
I'm trying to play this in the sense of I'm moving back and forth in order to play out the match. But I'm aware that there's a lot of tools that I have that I'm not usually using, and I need them against a lot of people, so I can definitely practice them against you. But what happens when I do is that the more I do it, the more random you become, because the observation part tends to lack conviction. Conviction might be a good word.
Yes, I can definitely recognize that as sort of the problem that I'm having, because... And actually, that's a somewhat accurate seeming way of looking at it. I am much more random on Karine than on Cammy. Or where I am random on Cammy, it's limited to a few very specific places. Part of this is just probably habits built up because it often sort of works on Karine. But fundamentally, on a basic level, I don't like that. That I build up these habits. Because it makes the game less interesting for myself as well.
Because to be honest, I've realized I jump against people simply because I'm bored of them not getting to try to anti-air, sort of.
this. That's a... Observation lacks conviction feels like a very accurate description of it. And the randomness is also a sort of clear effect on it. The more I end up losing against certain opponents or having trouble with them, good, back to 3 bars. Hopefully it will stay that way. But the more these things happen in my matches, unless I can see exactly what's going on very well, which is limited by the observation mentioned, I tend to get a little more random or erratic, and it sort of compounds itself, which then also more or less makes the match unpredictable to myself, and then therefore sort of causes a bit of a feedback loop. I can't switch back to the observation method mentally, simply because it's difficult to observe and reset without, well, basically stopping everything I'm doing, taking a breath, and starting over again. Which is a little difficult to get myself to do in matches. And so it becomes a whole cyclic mess of, well, an unfortunate spiral of me effectively creating a version of Street Fighter that I don't like very much.
Alright, this should be fairly laggy. Once again, I'm glad that we have either fans or just randoms from Brazil, but I still end up questioning, why would you do this to yourself?
Round 1. Fight.
Let's see. It's sorta okay, I guess.
Okay. Oh. Well, it's freezing up even on
No.
my end.
No, it's basically unplayable, yes.
Well, unfortunate as that may be, I guess I will just keep going.
Cool! It gave, like, Akuma Chun-Li's ability, because now every hit stutters because of lag. So it made everything it doesn't hit.
I see. So he has activated your V-trigger, has he?
Sure, why not?
Alright then. Good stuff.
We're eventually gonna have... That would be an interesting thing to give a character, actually.
Taking whoever's the opponent's V-trigger?
That would what would make 12 interesting. They could add 12 to this game, and 12 could just steal other people's V-triggers.
Huh. That is interesting. I can imagine it would work really well in certain matchups and not so well in others, though.
True, but there are very few characters who have V-triggers where you just go, nope, you can't possibly use this. And the good part about it is, nearly every V-trigger attack would therefore be relative to, like, there's no way to mess up or take away something that the character already has. It's basically, let's replace this V-trigger button with the V-trigger button of someone else. So if you're fighting Ryu, you get Ryu's parry, you know which button to hit for it. You didn't have anything else on that button before. Etc. Yep, and it makes the... Even more interestingly, it makes the sweet seem to hit 3 times. So yes, Akuma has absolutely activated my V-trigger.
Interesting. Alright then. Unfortunate luck we have today with the connections on our guests.
Okay, looks like they aren't willing to put up with that either. Good luck finding a Brazilian lounge to play in. Or some equivalent. And as it has shifted me out, I guess we are back to Alex versus Akuma.
And so, in any case, the obvious best thing that I could possibly do for my own enjoyment of the game, and honestly most likely my skill and really ability to develop more skill, which this also limits, would be to figure out how to fix my observation on Kareen. I have put a decent amount of effort into patience and similar concepts lately, but partly that maybe has just helped to expose this factor or make it obvious. Because while I can get to relatively patient, I can slow myself down a bit, I can't necessarily get my mind to just settle properly, or whatever it may be, that keeps me... The way I put it before when I was explaining it to Rillian over the weekend was it's a sort of makes me good at scrambles in really weird situations where I don't know where I am either because of just how things have played out or such, but leaves me in poor condition in neutral and the actual game I normally am trying to play.
The ironic thing about that being that if you were to have this problem with the characters reversed, you'd probably not even have necessarily noticed it.
Perhaps not.
As I'm constantly lately, due to the limited time I have for training in this game and the high requirements of Chun-Li spacing and timing stuff, it keeps on being obvious to me that if I were playing Cammy, I would not lose in certain ways that I'm losing now. Because there's a vast difference between I get more or less one chance at properly timing my reversal and can only do my reversal on knockdowns where I had enough time to charge that reversal. Versus EX Cannon's fight for the win.
Yes. And if your timing's off, just keep mashing.
Round one. Fight.
But also comes up in scrambles in the same way. Chun-Li is decent at scrambles, but you have to be really, really on point to actually get it done. For example, if you get air-to-aired on anyone with an invincible, even metered uppercut, and you land next to your opponent, this is effectively a guess or a mix-up. If you just do the uppercut, then if your opponent decided to go for an attack after that, and not bait the uppercut, then good for you. In Chun-Li's case, it's a question of, can I time this ES bird on landing perfectly? And was I even holding down back in the air enough that this will work? Have I been holding this charge for long enough that I can do the move at all? Because depending on how high you were in the air when you got air to air, the answer might be no. And recognizing, oh, I can't do this, is the same observation you're talking about. But on Kareen, you need that more than on Cammy. Because there are a lot of Kareen's moves that have to do with spacing, have to do with setting up situations, where you basically can't just go, EX for Senha, problem solved. Even though not not in the example I just spoke of, because in that example, honestly, you really can just EX or Senna most of the time. But there are a lot of other weird little scrambles where that's not the way to deal with it.
Right. I often get killed in various such scrambles because I hit EX or Senha rather than trying to do basically anything else, and my opponents tend to very quickly figure that out.
One thing that can often help you is to take advantage of the fact that you don't like the way the game is being played and make sure that you set up the form of the game you like playing as often as possible. This may cause you to have a lot of trouble ranking up, depending on the characters you face and how good your execution skill or other skills are. But it's kind of useless to get the higher levels of a game, start to feel good about it, start to feel like you understand it or feel good about yourself, and carry that frustration with you the entire time of when a match shows up in the way you don't like, you're stubborn and keep on playing the way you want to. You're not really building up a style of fighting that match that suits you. So you just end up upset at the game. Or at the players. That is a thing. If anyone asks me my general impression of this game, I really love Street Fighter V. I just don't like Street Fighter V players. Not the ones I end up facing most of the time.
Round 2. Fight.
It's not even the win at all costs mentality that gets me. Because, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. And it doesn't help that I really haven't played this game much since the lag changed. So, I've literally got this entire timing set up that could be wrong because of precisely how, for example, EX Spinning Bird Kick works. Even if you assume that I had... I don't even know how that works, actually, now to think about it. I'm very interested to find that out. I should check it, or have someone check it.
What thing is it specifically?
I've realized that I don't know which way the lag change would have affected my charge moves.
Ah.
In the sense that if it is that the charge move itself, the input has to do with when the game received it. That doesn't seem sensible, so it's not likely to be that. But it raises the other possibility that now that the game is effectively 1 frame faster, let's assume that I somehow had, through great genius, managed to make it so that the exact timing for entering my Spinning Bird Kick included the 5 frames of lag. If it has become 4 frames of lag, then now I hit the attack slightly before I have the charge to actually do it.
You win.
Though I don't think that's what happened. So far
What
from the little tests I've done, it is more so that the lag has somehow caused me to mess up my reversal timing, which seems like it should be impossible. But, again,
Round one.
because the reversal timing is related to that I can't mash, I must time this very, very precisely within a reversal window, usually toward the latter end of it, to make sure that I don't mess up. So I don't get to try twice. If I'm messing up my reversal windows, then looks like I'd have to train that all over.
You know, that makes me remember that I've noticed that I have reversal timing for wake-ups wrong, and I need to train that myself as well. And I think the timing when I noticed that may have been sometime around the lag patch. I can't say I remember for sure, however.
It seems so unlikely that it would be that, though. On the other hand, I mean, that really is... We are the type of players that would have tried to time the reversal timing absolutely as close as it could possibly be. So, I guess we can look into it, I guess.
When
One way or
was
another, maybe.
the lag patch?
I think it was the 23rd of October or something like that.
It could have been then, I don't know. The other sad part of my problem is that I can see so easily how it would have effectively come to be as a result of sort of how I grew into the fighting game, or sort of like grew up in Street Fighter V.
It's go time.
Simply because of just
Let's do this.
how I would have gotten perhaps frustrated with certain things that would then have made me like become more random in certain ways to deal with opponents that I didn't necessarily know how to deal with otherwise, and effectively end up compounding the problem.
Round one. Fight.
Because especially whenever I did some move that I didn't intend to, or that came out weirdly, I effectively put myself in the same sort of scramble that I would have been worried about. That combos. I thought Karina had to go up. Was that a counter hit?
No, it's counter hit.
Okay. No surprises then.
Round two. Fight.
But at the end of the day, bots were always intended to help us work on the physical parts of things, come up with new tricks for characters and so on. Fixing your mindsets is a personal journey, and bots can only help so much with it. You often need to fight other people. Whether your problem be nervousness, impatience, arrogance,
Or some combination of all of them.
You win.
I feel like some of my problem is oddly that things like that EX Mujin into parry just work. And
that
I
doesn't
sort of...
just work. You would have gotten thrown if it was me.
Right.
And I'm sure Santir will remember now to throw you when you do that. Because you're super throwable after a lot of them because of that.
Indeed. But a lot of times in a lot of situations, or against a lot of opponents, there are things like that that at least once or twice sort of just work. And I end up, like, sort of stopping paying attention once I've committed to my plan. Whatever it may be, in some regard. Or at least that's something that it feels like. Like...
Part of that is the lessened number of long sets that people play.
Ah. Oh, because in a long set your opponents would adapt and everything. So I've been spending too much time in casuals and not enough time in battle lounges.
Perhaps, but there's other ways to think of it as well. It depends a lot on the opponent type. There are definitely opponents who will play who will continue in the battle lounge because their idea of how to play the game is limited, you see, so... Even in battle lounge, all that will happen is that they'll get frustrated that their big damage or whatever isn't working. Not everyone, but there's some people I've fought at some relatively high LP that make me think, not how did they get here, because I completely understand how they get there. And I don't even think that they shouldn't be there. It's more so wondering if they have any chance of really rising from it. Seriously. Because it's a limiter. It's obviously something that's in your way. I fought a Sagat that basically didn't really have offense per se. They had the understanding that Sagat's buttons are long enough that he can just keep on hitting certain ones and it will deny the other person from playing Footsies at all. Which is reasonable. I mean, that's part of what he does. And sometimes other people basically go, well, okay, I'm not going to bother then. I don't have to play Footsies with you. I can beat you some other way. But if you're not thinking about that, if you're focused on dealing with a bunch of what you consider to be Sagat stuff, thinking about all these little nuanced options, looking for these perfect moments to do whatever you want, you don't think about that. And I think I played them twice in the same set of ranked matches. I think it was 3-2 in the end, but they won the first set of matches because it was just too much to wrap my mind around. I'm playing so badly compared to what this person wants to do. I'm approaching them so poorly. It was really quite bad. Because all I had to do was basically that. I could beat them almost entirely with just heavy punch because they would stick out buttons in front of them to prevent me from entering their space, and I could whiff punish or sort of preemptively do it. And it actually made me think about the matches with you, because you do basically the exact same thing. If I move to a particular space and set up a certain set of behaviors, I get to hit this button for free more or less forever. And we've discussed this before.
I admit to noticing the same thing. That part of a consequence of my problems perhaps are that I don't necessarily know how to confront you very well, because you are relatively skilled at effectively doing the spacing and control and shutting down the any like non-random attempts at play. And so if I'm trying to... Oops. If I'm trying to... I did not think that was going to work. My mind just did it. If I'm trying... Basically, I can play randomly against you, but then I don't gain the type of game that I'm interested in, and I don't think you necessarily have a very good experience from that either. But then if I don't, because I've had this problem and all of that, I don't have the skills built up to match you, more or less. And I've run into this problem in lots of places as well, because basically any opponent who demands those sorts of skills to play in the way I want pushes me back to playing in the way I don't want, or if they can beat me, beat the both ways really, then there's not necessarily all that much for me to do about it. For instance, that was basically just getting lucky effectively on a punish.
Between you and I in particular, it's hard to find a balance, because the way you play is useful to cause me a particular thing that I need to do, or need to improve at, but it doesn't really help you at all to do such things. For example, I know how to stop every Mayokin you do, but I don't know when you're going to Mayokin. And it's not necessarily, oh, this Mayokin is a good idea, per se.
I also am going to have to find a way to train on that particular sort of anti-air arrangement, if it's not, like, just flatly some setup that you can tweak slightly and I just always lose at.
That is in fact a setup.
Alright then.
But we are in fact going to recreate the lounge. We're at about the halfway point.
Alright.
And I would have rolled it back anyway. So remember that you are looking for 3 rounds first to 2 if you're joining.
And the new lounge is up.
Character select is usually off.
And I am your host, Rune Siren, if you're looking for who to join.
It's go time.
And we have a new Sakura. Possibly. Nope.
Let's do this.
feel like I can seppo out from under that particular arrangement, but I'm not entirely convinced the timing would work out regardless. Assuming I could even react to it.
Another important thing that comes up, if you find that you're not the most confident of people, as a generality when playing fighting games, being confident is not really that important. Confidence is more so a matter of understanding what you do and don't know, and it's hard to measure this for some people because they've not played these games before. They don't really have a way to say, okay, well, this is how this should work, and I understand that, so I should try this more often. Complex characters cause this problem. Characters that aren't well known and don't have a lot of people telling you, well, hey, do this, do that. But on the other hand, also characters who are well known and the consensus majority is, don't do that thing that you think is a really good idea. Someone will always figure it out. There are very few moves or options that are terrible to the point where they just stay unusable. They usually get patched if they are. But what they're quote-unquote good for may not be what people expect. Which is how maybe the DBFZ patch might have influenced some things. But the main problem with building up confidence, especially for people who have access to bots, is that because we are so often part of the testing process for them, it can be a little difficult to make yourself think of the bots even in the way they're designed to be used. Getting yourself to count is one thing, but we're so used to the idea that, okay, if I can get to X number easily at the beginning, this bot is probably too easy, needs tweaking. Generally, I do a lot of this judgment from watching, but most people aren't expecting new bot to be, I can get to 10 points super quickly. The problem is that this isn't true, and some bots are specifically marked easy.
You win.
Indeed.
So we will occasionally have players returning to Edbot and wondering why they're doing well because they've forgotten Edbot is an easy bot. But that does not mean that it's so easy that you will be able to do it first thing in the morning when you wake up. It means that you have to know less or there's a certain level of play of your character at which it is functionally easy after you've re-acclimatized yourself.
And that's probably...
that can be flustering. Super flustering.
That's probably partly the reasoning for my experience with Sakura Bot, where I managed to get 16 points and then 23 points at one point. But one thing that I noted alongside that is that while I was getting lots of these points, the distribution of which points I could get, it was kind of important, because for all the hundreds of points that I got on her over the weekend, I don't think I legitimately got 2 points from the intercept her dash on reaction factor. So regardless of anything else, I still have to work on that aspect of things.
That is another functional aspect of bots, which can be overlooked fairly easily if you just want to get back to fighting people, if you want to feel like you made some progress and move on. Generally, we do look at that across a bunch of characters. We watch and see what is the hard thing to do here. Where do most of the points come from? Because sometimes the thing that we count as hard in the bot isn't necessarily a specifically hard thing to do. It could be either a thing that the bot does infrequently, and therefore learning to react to it every time can be hard.
Or it can just be
and
that
other times,
when you're under pressure from all the other things in the bot, now this particular thing that would be easy on its own becomes hard. And so, if you're leaving out one point or the other while you're doing it, you're kind of doing yourself a major disservice. Which is why, for instance, even though I can get lots and lots of points on Sakura bot, I don't remotely consider myself done with her. Just because I know I can't do it all at once.
We do set things up based on this. The normal way that this is done is that there is one thing that is relatively easy to do. The situation comes up often. It is a skill that if you learn it really well, you will get better. So grinding it by using that as your main point system is good. But we want you to grind that until you basically could do it even if you weren't counting it. So you would get to the point of feeling, this is too easy, this can't be right. I keep on getting like 8 points off this thing. And then you'll almost always find that if you look at the next difficulty level, that no longer gives any points. Now, you could go, well, that's fine, I can get my points the other way and then stop doing that. But the bots are often in a state where you have to do the first thing in order to set up the situation where the bot will properly do the rest. At least half the bots are like this. You have to successfully do thing A to get most of your chances at B, C, or D. And it is by noticing that difference, it's basically a backup. If you decided, well, the medium version of this bot doesn't require me to do point A anymore, so I guess I'll just skip doing that now. You'll find that suddenly, wait, it's harder to get B, C, and D. Why is it harder? It's harder because you stopped doing A.
Yes, I noticed this in Sakura bot, or at least something that I assume to be a product of this, since I'm aware of this effect. In that, when I was first starting out with her, for like most of my first session, I was going like, you know, I have almost never seen her dash at all, even though that punishing that is one of the points, simply because I wasn't necessarily doing as well as I could have on the rest of it. And by the time I was doing some of my later sessions with her, she was dashing plenty. Not that I was reacting to it.
This is one of our subtle attempts at teaching people the psychology of fighting games through something not so visible in the bots. Something that is the equivalent of what happens in a match. But we really want most people to see it on their own, to come to the conclusion, oh, I need to do this successfully in order for this other thing to work properly.
Looks like I won. All right. Final round. Fight.
Right. If your opponent can jump in all the time and you don't anti-air them, they're not going to go for a trickier ground approach. So even if you're completely ready for that ground approach, it's useless on its own.
But that brings us back to the question of confidence. Part of the reason why the bots are like that is that depending on what you feel you need to train, what characters you have to go up against, etc., you basically train up to hard. And the specific reason we called the final level extreme was to give the impression that this is in fact beyond what probably even a normal person can do. Most of the time, extreme is where you go when you want to feel there's no way I'm going to get enough points. And work on extra stuff without the expectation of winning. Now, very high level players could almost certainly do the extreme part, but they are extremely strong, so that would make sense.
You win.
For the most part though, you should probably be able to handle hard if you're really familiar with the bot. But it's still good to go through easy and medium difficulties. Confirm that you can in fact get those 10 points, but the bot is not generally designed that you should be surprised that you are. Our content is, after all, mostly for handling, getting you out of bronze, so to speak, and good backup for when you have gotten out of bronze in some way that you can realize, oh, I still have bad habits, I can't handle this character, this particular thing keeps beating me, that sort of thing. But if you are in silver and able to hold your own, or can go up against gold players and not feel like you're being completely destroyed, you shouldn't be surprised that the easy and medium difficulty of bots is just something you can clear all the time. But of course, since you would then still have hard as an option, and all that really changes in most of those cases, presuming that you kept on trying to do all of the things, is how long you have to be able to last out while doing the thing correctly. Then you can get more or less the same experience and improve your consistency, because that is what hard mode generally is. It is a way to make yourself improve your consistency by removing one of the point systems that was helping you bolster and get up to that 10 points. Because fighting games are a quick experience. Most rounds are over in 4 or 5 solid interactions. If you messed up 2 more times than you quote-unquote should have, out of, let's say, 8 attempts your opponent makes at something, that can toss you the round. Whereas getting it right all 8 times, or even 7 out of 8 times, would allow you to win.
You win.
Not me this time.
Okay.
We continue with the Akuma versus Karine match, probably.
Let's do this.
The key to that confidence part, therefore, is to make sure you can. Every bot that you feel you've completed, every situation that you feel you can handle, make sure you can get to 10 points on the equivalent medium version of the bot. Hard, maybe not. You could train on hard.
Round 1.
And use extreme if somehow hard becomes too easy, or you're just trying to push yourself that day. But that is a way you can outright measure how confident you should be at something. If you can consistently get to 10 without losing on the medium difficulty, you probably should be confident enough in matches to believe that you could do this thing. If you find yourself struggling at the medium difficulty, that's also an indicator. In other words, if you can't do, let's say, 3 to 4 reps of 10,
Round 2.
not necessarily all in a row, but certainly I'd say at the point where you are succeeding more than you fail. Let's say if you got to 4 successes and only had 3 failures, it might still be somewhat inconsistent, but I would think you could feel a little confident at least. And of course, bots have all sorts of ways they can be repurposed as you need them. This is something we actually do quite a lot, but do not tend to put on the site because when we do it, it often is for just one character. It would be interesting to put in, but not quite the same.
Final round. Fight.
So for the sake of consistency in explanation, you might see us do something different or talk about it differently, but generally it's not a matter of, hey, we should go tell everyone that you can use CodyBot for this purpose, which doesn't seem anything like what CodyBot is normally for. But if you do have any questions like that, you catch us at a tournament or something, maybe. We have been considering, since no one really minds if you put stuff on the casual setups in terms of training. And bots are decently easy to enter, so if we're there early, for whatever reason, the setups are not heavily in use. Often happens at relatively smaller tournaments. And you just want some time to do something.
You win.
You might find that we input them. Or whichever one we feel most like dealing with.
Indeed.
At which point you could definitely ask, hey, do you have any specific way you use this for this character? Or know anything about it? We have a fairly diverse set of players. Even if they don't play your character, the person who plays the most similar character might have some ideas.
And as Relia noted, we do have a bunch of different little hyper-specific variants of ways to use our bots for things that aren't really necessarily things to put up on the site directly, but if you have some little problem and wonder, hey, can a bot solve this for me? You could send us an email on our contact page or such, and maybe you can. And we'll think about it for you a little bit.
And at worst, if I am doing research, I may even get to the point where I just make a bot that's for that purpose. Whether or not it goes on the site would more so come down to whether or not it could be for that purpose against all characters.
Round 2. Fight.
Since we don't do the custom ones that often, but they do exist in a few cases. Or even slightly varied versions of the ones we have that we just didn't want to be too confusing with. In fact, CodyBot ended up being a good example of what this sort of looks like. Zeku also kinda did. There are definitely some bots where say, okay, this bot works, but with these 2 key triggers and these extra move sets and all this stuff, what you want is probably not the same. And we definitely ended up doing that quite a lot with Cody. There's a whole long explanation about how to put together Cody for 4 different types of player. Or characters?
You lose.
Half and half, really. Hopefully it's not getting too complicated. We are getting into the habit of that a little much, but generally when the bot is meant to be advanced, we'll roll with it.
Round one. Fight.
We had definitely planned to do this for example, Ibuki. But then somehow it turned out that, oh look, Fumashuriken just kind of works on the bot we have now. There's still some research to be done on that, actually. And I have been fighting more Ibuki recently. Thank goodness, given that if I don't get some more experience in that matchup soon, well, let's just say it will be very upsetting. If I get eliminated by an Ibuki at Frosty Crossings, I swear I'm going to grind the matchup for a month.
Yes.
And then I will stop meeting Ibukis in tournament. But then I'll stop meeting Ibukis in tournament.
Profit. Yes, she does seem to be your demon. By roster as well as, just character.
Ibuki is definitely that character that tempts me the most to just go, you know what, I'll just pick Cammy. And it's not because I like playing Cammy. I love Cammy as a character, but not to play. It's just that eventually, very correctly, every Ibuki I meet that realizes, oh, I actually have to deal with like some footsies and defense here. They'll go, I wonder if my command dash shenanigans work. And they'll quickly realize, hey, yes, your command dash shenanigans work. And then they'll do that until I die. So personally, I have great respect for their ability to recognize the situation and capitalize on it. But it's not helping me any. But that experience is also a required experience. As we've noted before, we do somewhat live the poverty life, despite the fact that we are relatively serious about this game. It is purposely done that not every player has every bot. It makes it much easier for us to see the differences between people of similar skill and conceptual understanding of things, but who do or do not have either time with a bot or access to a bot under normal circumstances, and see how they differ when going into casuals and what they understand and don't understand.
Round one. Fight.
Now, obviously, we relent a bit on this at the beginning of every year, just because, you know, we build up fight money, have more time, perhaps want to go to tournaments and not get eliminated too easily, those sorts of things. So it does expand. But we are also probably going to see new characters in Season 4. They have promised us at least 5 seasons of direct development style support. I have a feeling they're going to go for 6, probably. But there's a bunch of specifics in that have to do with how you get people to buy the game, what their main interests are, what is and is not hype. and so on, which makes it a little bit different. They can't afford for this game to be a one-hit wonder, and at the same time they don't have unlimited development resources, so... So at Capcom Cup we're more or less expecting the sort of character that makes a bunch of people who like the older games go, yes, finally, it took you all long enough to add back Viper or Oro or Fei Long or someone. It usually has to be a character that people liked even if they didn't play them. And we're kind of lower on those now. We're down to like 5.
Well, it's a good 2 or 3 seasons, right?
Not really, because
No?
they need to use like 2 per season. And eventually, with the amount of other fighting games coming out, you have to know how to catch people's different bits of attention. I can see why they took so long to release Sagat, because Sagat is so hard to balance for this game. Even though people are still going, but he should be this way. And I'm not really disagreeing with those people. There's some stuff that he could use to make him stronger in terms of Tiger Knee stuff. At minimum. That I don't think would have been overkill to give him. But at some point you have to make some decisions about, okay, how dominant is this character going to be? So as sad as it might be, it is somewhat better to release slightly limited Sagat and then upgrade him later a little bit.
It's always a lot easier to buff a character than to nerf them in terms of just
No, it
community
isn't.
response. No?
In terms of community response, sure, but Capcom is notoriously bad at buffing characters.
Ah, right. I
Because
suppose
of
if
that
you do it
whole
wrong.
lack of centralized vision thing.
Yes, I suppose if you do it wrong, it kind of negates all the benefits you would have gotten.
All of them. All of them. Fighting games are hard when you're working with a full team because everyone has slightly different perceptions, priorities, that sort of thing. That's how we got Season 3 Zangief. That's how we got Season 3 Abigail. And there is some belief that might not be entirely untrue that Capcom is more or less manipulating the psychology of players to change the way that the game is looked at and therefore experienced and or enjoyed.
I would
It
have
would
to
be a
ask for your,
sad thing.
I'd have to ask for your opinions on this, but I feel like it would probably be a long explanation.
It's not really that long. It's more so that I don't really want to feed into it because even if it is true, because I can totally see them doing it, it's not as nefarious as some people would make it out to seem. It's not like, oh hey, let's overbuff this character entirely so that they're the one people see now. Because all you have to do is buff characters to the point where someone who really likes them will put in work to make them better. To play them, that is. You don't have to go, well, okay, no one's playing this character, let's give them all the buffs possible and see what happens. And I don't usually think that's what they were trying to do most of the time. It's just that if you have a bunch of people who have different ideas about how to improve a character, and even with all your testing, you never came to a consensus about which of those things was important, which is reasonable to happen because what helps Abigail in one matchup doesn't necessarily help Abigail in another matchup.
Round 2. Fight.
So you throw them all, you see what sticks, and then you dial some back. But people are even somewhat expecting this to happen. They're expecting a situation where someone is going to get overbuffed at the end of Season 3 because they'll be like, this character isn't getting enough attention. What is it that people feel he's lacking? Well, I've heard they think he's lacking this, and I heard they think he's lacking this. But we don't know. So we kind of have to give him all those things and hope it works. Which isn't the best plan, but if you buff a character and everyone goes, that's not the buff that would actually help. And the few people who did believe it would be either start to believe that or just give up. Because, I don't know, maybe it didn't make them better enough.
I suppose that probably is kind of hard to do all of this by analysis after a point.
It quite sucks. I'm relatively sure that people spend inordinate amounts of time thinking about this. Like, massive amounts of time just going, is this the right one? Is this the right one? So all these months where we are gearing up for Capcom Cup, or gearing up for Tekken World Tournament, or whatever else, the developers are probably there somewhere scrounging their brains to, is Zeko strong enough? Does he need one frame passive recovery on this move in order to somehow make him more viable?
I do not envy them. That can't be an easy job.
Which is unfortunately, I think, why they've fallen into that quote-unquote bad habit of pushing out the season update and then slightly later the final season update. Because until certain things are in the hands of a large number of players, you just don't have the data to know what you've really done.
I know
because so much of it is about perception.
In other types of games, like MOBAs and such, they have like preview servers where they try things out and such. Is that a sort of concept that can be applied to fighting games effectively? Where they just try out a bunch of different buffs in some beta environment?
I expect it would work as well as it does on the PTS on Paladin, which is to say not at all.
Alright.
You get all of the complaining and bad blood, and very little of the benefit.
I see. Does it just not provide developers with enough data somehow, or what is it?
It's a trade-off. How many people do you need?
I suppose I have no idea.
If you have a player base of 2 million, 2,000 people is not enough. In a game where you have 30 characters, 20,000 people may not be enough. That's still, assuming you got it right, less than 1,000 people playing every character you need tested.
I suppose that at some point you end up needing half your player base to just play the test servers, at which point it is your actual game.
It's more so actually that once you've gotten that many people, any discussion about whether or not it is a good or bad idea, all the bad blood you could get out of that is already there. But back to mindsets, this has been a problem of mine in every fighting game I've ever played. The better I get at a game, the harder it becomes to attack me. The harder it becomes to attack me, the more often people wait and defend. And the less I'm playing the game I want to play.
Yes, I was just
Because
observing
it's not really that...
I am not really capable of reading your, or like, sorting out your tactics or such, as well as I am against some other players, and it makes it very difficult to approach you. Because I don't know what
And
to
I have a
try to mess
higher
with.
problem of that. The higher problem I have with that is that's a thing I train on purpose.
Mm.
So it's a very counterintuitive experience to train yourself to be invisible. Like conceptually, mentally, my opponent is not supposed to be able to see my intention. Let's assume I could reach that level. But then that would just induce a lot of terror and I'm not attacking you situations.
Yes, hesitance becomes the only option left. Or blind random rage, or various related things.
Right, and I hate both those things. This has happened to me since I started playing these games back in, well, really long ago. For example, that jump comes out of that moment of, if I don't attack you at least somewhat riskily, this match is going to devolve into something where really I just get to hit heavy punch a lot, and that's the whole game.
Yes. Or I end up doing things like that.
And it's not even that things like that bother me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind if my opponent just goes, screw it, Hail Mary. But it's the only thing they're willing to do sometimes. So the entire match becomes that. And if their Hail Mary requires meter, means that the whole experience goes down.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then from my perspective it becomes partly that it's the only thing I have available to me to do, because I can't, like, plan, here's how I will disassemble your game plan, if I can't figure out what the heck your game plan is exactly. And so I suppose the other option is for me to just figure out how to build my own sort of... I guess I want to call it a wall. I don't know if that's like the correct descriptor, but... basically
The problem
my
with that is
perfect...
my characters are generally built to not have that happen to them.
Yeah, which makes it all the more difficult. Wait, what?
See?
I see. I see. That was interesting. And now here I am trying to regain my bearings with like a sliver of life left. You're basically guaranteed to finish me off quite easily. If you, like, basically just keep doing what you're doing, I suppose. Or I can get into, like... I feel like you're trying to make me jump.
No, I'm actually just failing the execution of the kill.
Ah, I see. Alright, well yes, that will work too. And I was not in a state where I could parry that.
You lose.
It is in a way balanced that such characters who have all of these options generally have really high execution and awareness requirements. The thing you need to do is almost always possible, but can you be consistent at it?
That itself seems like something that's difficult to balance in a way.
Let's do this.
Hmm. I've never seen it done.
Hmm.
Throughout fighting games, this particular archetype of character that I play has always been either super dead or super broken. Like, with absolute consistency, my characters have always been terrible or brokenly good. And it doesn't have to be that they are given a whole bunch of overwhelming anything. Because I'm not usually playing those characters. There are characters who are broken for that reason, and then there are characters who are broken for this reason.
Round one. Fight.
In a way, that's probably why she has such a conservative V-trigger and V-skill. Because if you give a character like this who has all these weird options and all these weird spacings that they can do whatever they want, some sort of huge combat mechanic, then you have Cammy. But Chun-Li gets to do even more of what she wants than Cammy does, functionally speaking. It's just that for Cammy, it's easy executionally and has some relatively high risks in it when you go crazy. And for Chun-Li, it's hard executionally, but has very few risks executionally once you've actually gotten it done. The risk you're normally taking is, can I execute this thing? It's probably why Kareen was the bot basis they chose when Tool Assisted was doing that for a bit. Because at the time, given Kareen's buttons, she was even better than Chun-Li at the job. So it was basically just, okay, I have every option in the game, and if really necessary, I could approach you, and if I have perfect reactions, then I can just literally EX Seppo into stuff from half screen. And you can't do anything.
Bot can have perfect reactions. Beyond any human level.
Round one. Fight.
But yes, my perspective is a lot of, okay, I want to attack. But I want to attack in a way that my opponent has to come up with the right answer to my attack. Or guess. Guessing is good. I'm perfectly fine with them guessing and just winning. Part of the reason I can't play Jury, for example, is because that doesn't happen a lot. In Jury's case, the opponent just gets to hit her anyway. They don't have to be all that good at figuring out what to do. They just do something. Wow, that was... Again, I don't really mind the rollback lag even in this match, but that one was new.
What happened? We didn't exactly get to see it.
I hit crouch light kick. I think the game couldn't decide whether or not the crouch light kick had whiffed or hit. It gave me the final bar of meter, so my CA gauge started to flash, and then it went back.
I see. Were you trying to use the CA gauge at that time?
No, it's just that
Okay.
if you didn't realize that, if you had to make a split-second decision based on it, we're not usually watching the meter for the entire match, so I could have, just for a moment,
Ah. And not notice it
thought
go
I had
back.
more meter.
That would be disappointing.
Also terrifying.
I can imagine getting legs when you expect CA would not be a pleasant experience.
But one thing we do know from our resident person who spends a lot of time working on the internet is that there are some minor issues in the Europe area right now, so I'm not too surprised at this particular rollback. But it generally isn't the deciding factor in the match from my side. So I hope it wasn't too terrible for Sundir. I do know that one big problem I have when it is laggy is getting myself to not use her overhead.
What happens to it in lag?
It's unseeable, more or less.
Ah, it's just too good at the time.
She has one of the few comboable overheads in the game. It does only combo if it counter hits, but it is like a third of the screen.
That's mildly terrifying. I was not aware that you could do that. Possibly because of my own lesser lack of tracking, shakes fist at. Yes, in rollback lag that seems rather horrifying. Because regardless of what you did, I literally don't know if it hit or not until a few frames later.
Plus it's only -2, so it's technically your turn, but if you didn't see it in time to recognize it was what it was, and I hit a button, I
Then
still
I
have
die.
advantage.
Fight.
So you basically sort of get to combo it either way. Sort of.
Terrifying thing.
What can you combo it into? Light kick into legs or such?
It's like kick into legs and also like punch into whatever. It's a very stressful move though, because if it's blocked and I hit light punch and the light punch hits you, I'm supposed to go into crouch medium kick to get more damage so I can finally get the spinning bird kick from the medium spinning bird kick. But if it hit and counter hit, it lets me get the light punch, but the light punch must be automatically followed by the light spinning bird, and you cannot go into the medium kick because the medium kick will not actually hit.
I see, another one of those. The characters seem to have a lot of those. I probably have a couple at least that I just don't necessarily, well, have to pay attention to as much as you do.
Chun-Li wins. Round one. Fight.
So as I was saying, while I can learn to be invisible, a large part of what I need to learn to do is recognize when my opponent has reached the point of being afraid is the wrong word, but where their mindset is no longer even remotely toward I'm willing to hit buttons to attack you because I know what's going to happen.
Then of course it just becomes, I'm going to hit buttons to attack you because I have no idea what's going to happen.
Right, but there is a space in between there. There's a space where the opponent wants to defend because otherwise they might get beaten by my relentlessness, with no way to stop it. And there's a point where they've basically gone, oh, there wasn't another attack. So now I don't know what to do, so let me do something random.
And of course you can arrange yourself so that you beat at least most of the randoms, I believe. Of course then things happen if we get the one that isn't most. That was a great hit with the EX legs.
That was the other thing I needed to learn to do.
Final round.
ES Leg solves a lot of that problem, because of that aspect.
That's like perfect max range, it seemed like.
ES Likes is at a certain range an automatic solution to a ton of randomness.
Indeed.
But I'm also aware that Suntear goes on no longer, more or less, whereas we are probably poking a little bit more, so shifting around to make that match our last on-stream match of the night.
Alright then. I hope my soccer bot practice will eventually, once I manage to get her dashes, help me with Alex's dashes as well. Or Amara's, for that sake. Her dash throw is a little bit terrifying.
That's not likely.
I think I have to do Camibot or something else for that, though.
Not even Camibot will fix that.
Hmm.
Hers is calibrated around dashing in a specific situation that is not necessarily Ryu only, but no other character needs to use it in the same time.
I see.
So for those of you who are curious about that, it is basically that there are a few characters in this game who have the option to try to combo a difficult combo on a single simple reaction out of the single stand medium punch. There are not too many characters like this. A lot of them either get to hit something or can't hit anything at all because they couldn't dash after it. Ryu is one of the few characters in the game who has a good reason to hit stand medium punch, see that stand medium punch, make contact, and then go, I probably can't or should not try to confirm all of this. However, if the medium punch has hit, Ryu is usually plus 7 or something? I think it's 7. Yes, it must be exactly 7 because Sweep doesn't naturally hit. If you're not familiar with frame data, you can learn it by learning which move is able to follow which move, and that might help out. Because that is how a lot of people remember these things. Ryu's medium punch makes him plus 7, and the opponent was probably not expecting to be hit. Once they were hit, they were hoping to block, or hoping that the combo would fail or end, or something. Which means you have about 10 frames to recognize this has happened, recognize that Ryu dashed, and hit something. It's technically more than 10 frames because, again, Ryu's throw itself takes 5 frames to do, but his dash is only like 16 or something, so if you start from plus 7,
There's nothing to be done about
He
that,
could-
huh?
he could dash at you and you would not necessarily be able to fireball him. That's how fast it is. If Ryu has hit you with, especially a counter hit one, if he hits you with a counter hit medium punch and dashes after it, perfectly buffered, and you try to throw a Hadouken, you will get thrown.
I would be
And
content
that is a bunch
to-
of frame data.
I would be content to be able to tech, personally.
Now, this isn't to say that you couldn't check Ryu most of the time if he did dash, but most of us check dashes with our mediums when we're expecting them. At a certain range, it just makes more sense to check the dash with a medium, because if you hit the light, it might whiff in front and something. That's part of why they add extra active frames to light buttons, to prevent that from happening. Now, this doesn't come up too often, and generally, if you just were to hit stand medium and then hit it again, you might have some good situations going on. But she has a whole system built up around that. Either way, as I mentioned, this is the last on-stream match of the night. That's set. Join us tomorrow for Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2, the Tuesday train. And on Wednesday for probably Sandbag Casuals XL, but we're still not absolutely certain of that because the person who's supposed to play that may not be in the condition at the time. Life comes at you fast. You may shift who actually plays, and so on as well. On Thursday we'll be having Kame House, our Dragon Ball FighterZ beginner lobby. We definitely don't think that the Dragon Ball FighterZ bots we have shifted people to not be beginner yet, so we'll be continuing with that. And all of the research I've been plugging away at with the DBFZ bot has not come to any fruit. Therefore, Friday is more Dead or Alive last round battle launch.
Alright.
That said, however, so far, we've had a good night.
And so with that, good night everyone. If you want to have a look at any of the bots we've been talking about, including Sakura bot, you can do that at our website 2-mk.org. And otherwise, for updates on whether or not we do in fact do the Sandbag Casuals or what we do instead, you can look at our Twitter 2_MK_FGC. And otherwise, stop back around and we'll see you again. Good night.